Hey everyone, and welcome to Lessons in Leadership. This is Bill Storm here with you. And this week we're moving on to chapter 8 of our study series of John Maxwell's book, Leadership Gold. Now, the title of this chapter is A Leader's First Responsibility is to Define Reality. Now, I'm excited about this chapter because that title alone made me stop and pause and go, well, wait a minute. Everybody's reality is different. So how are you supposed to define reality? And we're going to get into that here in just a minute. Also, remember, there are 26 lessons in this series. So you're going to want to be sure to subscribe to the channel right now so that you're notified when the next lesson becomes available. And if you missed any of the previous, the first 7, you can always go back and watch those at your convenience. Also, if you'd like the show notes, the leadership training worksheet that I put together that goes along with this study session, the biblical alignment check worksheet, and or the teaching video of today's lesson, please just shoot me a quick email at billstorm@billstorm.com, and I'm happy to send them your way. Okay, without further ado, let's go ahead and dig in, and let's see what John has to say here about this. Okay, so John says one of the most overlooked yet essential responsibilities of a leader is to define reality. So John puts it pretty plainly. He said, leaders are not in the business of sugarcoating. They're not in the business of pretending or drifting in uncertainty. Instead, they have to confront the truth. They have to frame it clearly for their team and then chart the path forward. Now, the principle may sound really simple, but in practice, it requires a lot of courage. It requires humility and a deep commitment to growth, not only for yourself, but also for those you lead. Okay, so again, as we go through this, we have to stop and pause, and we have to constantly question what John is saying, because it's very difficult to define reality. Your reality is based on your experiences. Everyone on your team has had different experiences. Their reality may be very different. So as we dive through this, keep that in mind. So why defining reality actually matters? So John says people look to leaders for clarity, especially in times of change or crisis, and even opportunity. Uncertainty breeds fear, it breeds rumors and paralysis. So if the leader doesn't step up to define reality, the void will be filled with speculation, confusion, and mistrust. Well, we've all seen that happen before, right? Without vision, the people perish, right? I mean, that's right out of the Bible. Now, when the leader defines reality, number one, they set the foundation for trust. People follow leaders who tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Let's say that again. People follow leaders who tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. We like to call that, in slang terms, we like to say, we're going to call it tight, right? You call it as it is, not how you want it to be, but we call it tight. It's just, this is the truth. This is this current situation. This is how it is. Number two, create alignment. A clearly defined reality ensures that everyone sees the same picture and works from the same understanding. Okay, I haven't seen it yet in my own personal experience where everybody sees the same picture and works from the same understanding. Okay, we try to do that. We try to get as close as possible to that. But you're either going to have people that are just going to kind of go along with it. They may not see it as the reality that you see, but they're willing to go along with it and they'll get on board. And then there are some people who may say yes to it, but that's not really their reality and they're really not on board. So being a leader, that's why the trust part is so important, because you're not always going to get everybody to believe in what you see. They're not going to believe in your reality, but if they trust you enough, they may go ahead and follow you anyway. Number three, build resilience. So facing reality together enables teams to make wise decisions and move forward with confidence. So simply put, defining reality is not about negativity, nor is it about blind optimism. It's about painting an honest picture of what it is, so you, your team, your people can help build what could be. Okay, so that's why we calling it tight. We use that term a lot in the Tony Robbins organization. You take a look at the overall picture of what's going on, and we'd have a meeting and we'd say, okay, guys, we're going to call it tight here. This is the current situation. This is our current reality as far as sales go, right? Or our project goes. This is where we stand. Now we have to figure out what we're going to do with it and how we're going to move forward from there. Okay, so here's 5 key takeaways from the chapter. Number 1, denial is dangerous. Okay, number 1, denial is dangerous. Leaders who avoid the truth or hope things are just going to work out somehow set their teams up for disappointment and failure. Ignoring problems, sticking your head in the sand doesn't make them go away. It just makes them grow. Number 2, optimism needs grounding. Optimism needs grounding. Positive thinking is powerful, but when it ignores reality, it becomes toxic. People don't need people don't need a false sense of security, right? They need honesty paired with hope, right? They need to see what it clearly is. Then they need to have faith in their leader, faith in the other people on their team, that they can work through the problem, right? So just positive thinking alone isn't going to solve the problem. Number 3, defining reality is a service. Defining reality is a service. So leaders provide a gift when they help others see clearly. Clarity reduces fear and allows people to contribute solutions instead of being consumed by uncertainty. So yes, this is a service. As a leader, you are serving your people by helping them to see what it is, but then also helping them understand that they have the gifts and talents as a team to be able to see their way through it. So that way they're focused on solutions and not the problem. Number 4, leaders must look in the mirror first. Okay? Leaders must look in the mirror first. You cannot define reality for others if you haven't faced it yourself. A leader must ask, am I being honest with myself? Am I being honest with my team? And am I being honest with the circumstances around me? Number 5, the path forward is built on truth. Okay, that's interesting. What is truth? So John says, once reality is acknowledged, leaders and teams can create strategies, rally resources, and move toward a better future together. Now, I have been a participant in many a meeting. And some of these things sound overly simple, but this is actually what happens in real life. Most people get caught up in fear. They get caught up in the what ifs. And they don't really move forward. They just don't make decisions. They're not decisive in their decisions. So then they start analyzing it. And then they get analysis of, a paralysis of analysis. And they never really move forward. So as simple as some of these things seem, this is actually what happens in real life. Okay, so I'd like you to take that as an action step. I'm going to actually give you a few action steps here that John lays out. But the action step that I would say is to have a meeting with your team and say, guys, today we're going to sit down, we're going to call it tight. We're not going to sugarcoat. We're going to call it like it is. What do you see? What is the truth? What is the reality of the situation that you see from your vantage point, from your perspective? And once we get all of that out, once we've done that, now we can start looking for solutions to the problem. So here are the action steps for leaders according to John. These are practical ways to put teaching into action. Number 1, take an honest assessment. Okay, well, that's pretty much just what I said, right? Set aside the time to evaluate the current reality of your team or your organization. And you're going to ask yourself, what is really working right now, right? Because if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? What's working? Let's keep doing more of that. Number 2, what isn't working? Even if I wish it were, right? You can be hopeful. You could wish something would work out better. But if the strategy isn't working, it's time to put it aside and replace it with something that is. Because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. We don't want that. And then number 3, what truths have I been avoiding? What's the big, what's the big purple elephant in the room that I'm trying to avoid? So each person really should write these things down, and then you share them as a team. That'll give you a better overall view of what's really going on. Takeaway number 2, or action step number 2, sorry. Communicate clearly and frequently. Yes, yes, and yes. You cannot communicate clearly and frequently enough. You can't wait till a little flame gets out of control and becomes a forest fire. You need to catch it early. So people would rather hear tough truth than be left in the dark. So as the leader, you have to speak plainly, right? You're not going to bury reality in a bunch of double talk or jargon. Next, acknowledge challenges and uncertainties, but pair them with vision and next steps. Don't get caught in the muck, right? Don't get caught in the weeds. Acknowledge the problem, but then start discussing next steps. Vision, what's the solution? Always solution. What else can we come up with? What's another way we can do this? What's a different way we haven't thought of? How can we be resourceful? Next, keep the lines of communication open. Silence breeds fear. Don't keep your people in the dark, right? Silence breeds fear. Constantly let everyone know what's going on. Pretend you're out in the field, you're in battle. Everybody needs to be aware of what's going on so that you can all come together. Action step number 3, balance hope with honesty. Balance hope with honesty. Paint the picture of reality, but don't leave people stuck there. Offer a vision of possibility and progress. So here's a few examples. Here's where we are right now. Here's what that means for us. And here's how we can move forward together. So this combination builds trust and momentum. So it might be something like this. You're in a meeting and you go, okay, guys, based on our conversations right now, here's where I think we are right now. Okay, would we agree with that? Raise your hand. Yes, 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 and yes. Okay, good. Number next. Here's what that means for us. Based on our current situation, this is where we stand. This is what this is going to mean for us. But based on all of your feedback that have come together, you guys have provided some amazing solutions. And here's some ideas on ways that we can move forward together. So the next step is for us to hammer down what are the next action steps we're going to take so we don't get caught in the weeds and we can start creating some momentum and moving forward. Action step number 4, invite collaboration. Defining reality doesn't mean dictating solutions. Once you've clarified the truth, invite your team into the problem-solving process. Okay, I jumped way ahead of John, right? That's kind of what I just did. But here's some questions that you can ask. Number 1, if you're talking to your team, given where we are, what are our best options? Who's got an idea? Next, what strengths can we leverage right now? Right? We don't want to focus on our weaknesses. We're very strong in these areas. How can we leverage those strengths? Number 3, how can we move forward more effectively together? Okay, what are the speed bumps in our business right now? How can we eliminate those and how can we be more effective moving forward together? So this takes that honesty and then it turns it into empowerment. And number 5 for an action step is model courage. Okay, model courage. As the leader, your example matters more than your words. So if you face reality with composure, your team will too. Show them that acknowledging truth isn't a threat. It's just about calling it tight. It's about getting real with it, right? It's about defining the reality as you see it. And that's the first step towards transformation. So here's the ripple effect. When leaders take responsibility to define the reality, they set off a powerful ripple effect. Teams feel safer, they feel more united, and they feel more capable. And that's how trust grows. So action replaces hesitation. I'm going to say that one again. Action replaces hesitation, which is what we need to do more of. And organizations become stronger not because the problems disappeared, but because they face them head on. So John's reminder here is really just a timeless principle. Leadership is not about making people comfortable with illusions. It's about giving them clarity so they can move forward and act with confidence. Final thoughts on this before we get into the biblical alignment check. As leaders, our first responsibility isn't just to inspire or strategize or motivate people. While those things are important, those are things that come later. Our first responsibility is to define reality. You need to know where we stand. It's like the State of the Union, right? Where do we stand right now? And once your people know where they are, they can begin to imagine where they're going or where they can go. And when you pair the reality with vision, you don't just lead. Now this is how you empower transformation. Okay, so there's what John had to say. Now, I always want to make sure that I'm leading correctly according to God's word. Okay, this is something newer that I've started to add in. It's become much more important to me because there's so many authors out there. There's so many modern day gurus, and they're all giving their version of truth on how things should be done. And I think that needs to be checked. I think we need to go back to the Bible in this case to see what God has to say about it. What's God's word say about this particular topic to make sure that it's in alignment? Now, many times it is, and much of the things that John says are in alignment. Some of the things that other authors have put out there are definitely not in alignment, and I want to know that, right? I don't want to follow blindly. Just because somebody says it doesn't mean it's truth. So let's go through an example here. So John's perspective, John teaches that a leader's first responsibility is to define reality for their people. So John says, face facts honestly, don't sugarcoat, help the team see where things really stand, then give hope and direction. So here's an example. Let's say sales are down. The leader should not pretend everything is fine. Instead, they should say something like this. Team, here's the reality. Sales are down 15% this quarter. And here's what that means for us right now. And here's how we'll work together to get back on track. Now, I've been part of meetings that are just like that. Again, I'll go back to the Tony Robbins organization, right? If ticket sales were down for an upcoming event that we had, that is for the team leader to bring up to say, hey, team, we want to have an amazing event, but sales are down 15% right now. So here's what that means for us right now. We're not serving people at the level that we could. We're not reaching as many people. We're not going to be able to impact as many people based on our current situation. So here's what we need to do. Here's the action steps, or let's talk about action steps that we can take that'll get us back on track. So the focus here, though, is on personal responsibility. The leader must be courageous enough to call things as they are, hence calling it tight. Now, here's a biblical perspective. Scripture affirms that honesty, courage, and vision are critical, but it also adds a deeper layer. Ultimate reality is not just the facts that we see. It's the truth that God defines. Well, how does God define things? So I give you a few examples that you can look at inside the biblical alignment check worksheet. So I'll leave that for you just for time's sake. But here's an example in leadership context. So worldly leadership reality, facts, if you will, right? Maybe you're trying to grow your business, but you say, we don't have the resources to expand right now. It's impossible, right? We don't have the resources to expand right now. It's impossible. Or maybe you're in a sales situation where you're coming down to this event that you've been promoting and you have very little time left. So you might say something like, we don't have enough time left in order to hit this sales objective. It's impossible, right? That's worldly leadership reality. Those are facts. But biblical leadership reality, God's truth, if you will, is very different. So in God's truth, you might say, on our own, we are limited. On our own, we are limited. But if God has called us to do this, he will provide what we lack. Now, for some of you that are listening to this, that might sound like hocus pocus, right? You may say, well, Bill, that's just not the reality of the thing, right? And that would be true for you because that is your reality. That is your level of consciousness, how you see things. And that's okay, right? That's okay. I was there also. But I've also, throughout my life, seen amazing things happen that I would never have thought could possibly happen. So we like to say, well, that's a God thing, right? Because sometimes just based on our own reality, based on our own experience, based on as far as what we can see, that is as far as we can go. But there are other people that somehow amazingly are able to make things happen. So we call that the God thing. So here's the subtle difference between these two. So in the worldly approach, and I'll say in here with John's approach, John's approach in this chapter stops at leaders define the reality for your team. The Bible's approach goes further, though. Leader defines reality, but reality is ultimately grounded in God's truth, not just the facts that you see. Okay? So it's not that John isn't in alignment, but it's the base level. It's the base level. You have to do this first, right? But then a leader who is deeply rooted in faith is going to say, here's the reality of the situation, and it may be impossible based on our current situation, but ultimately, there are things that are beyond what we can see. They're beyond our personal power, if you will, right? That's a Tony Robbins thing, personal power. Sometimes it goes beyond personal power and it goes to God's power. You can't measure what that is. You don't even understand what that is. So in practice, a Christian leader doesn't ignore facts, but they don't stop at the facts either. I love that, right? A Christian leader doesn't ignore facts, but they don't stop at the facts either. They interpret circumstances through the lens of Scripture. Now, why does this matter? Because if the leader only relies on observable facts, that leader can limit vision to what seems humanly possible. They might lead with a survival mentality, right? There's only so much to go around. There's only so much we can do. They may miss opportunities where faith is required. But if the leader also relies on God's truth, right? This is the biblical emphasis. That leader can lead with both honesty and hope rooted in God's promise, right? Because if you're working as unto God, who's to stop you from achieving your mission, right? So you lead with both honesty and hope rooted in God's promises. Number two, you inspire people beyond what they see with their own eyes. Geez, I mean, if we stopped at what we see with our own five senses, right, we wouldn't get anywhere. I use this example all the time, right? We're breathing oxygen. You can't see it. You can't hear it. You can't taste it. You can't touch it. So how do we know it's there? Well, we just believe that it's there. Same thing with the wind, right? I can't touch it. I can't grab it. I can't see it. But yet it's there. So we can't always be limited just by what we can sense. And then last, the leader, a modeled faith-filled leadership that points others back to God. And I think that's really important because especially in today's day and age, we're so far removed from it. And we're taught so strongly that, you know, if you want to make a change, it's just about hustle and grind and, you know, your personal power and all of these things. And we forget that there's a power far greater than us that's directing all of this, right? There's a conductor that rules the universe that we can't even understand. So we have to always remember that, and we have to come back to the idea that it's not just about personal power. And I know that contrasts to what Tony says. And of course, I was a speaker for Tony Robbins, so that may seem ironic for me to say that. But that's the whole point. That's the whole point of this study, is you learn these things and you take them as far as they can go. And then eventually what you find is some of these things fail you. And you wonder why they fail you. And my answer always comes back to this, because there's things that are beyond what we know. There are things beyond what we can comprehend. And that's why there's that missing piece, and hence the point of this study session. So I hope this was really helpful for you today. And again, John is right? Leaders must face reality. But in a biblical sense, a leader defining reality isn't just about naming what it is, it's aligning it with what God says is true. Now, if you can figure that out, right, you've come a long, long way in your journey. If you know what God's purpose is in your life, and you put all of your effort into doing your work under God as a leader, you will succeed over time. Will it will be easy? No. What character or what figure in the Bible ever did God's work where it was easy? I can't name one. Maybe you can. Maybe somebody can shoot me message and say, oh, well, Bill, so-and-so did this with God's help and it was a piece of cake. But most of the examples, especially of leaders within the Bible, it's hard, really hard. But if you're a leader, you've been given that responsibility. All right. What's that saying? God gives his toughest challenges to his strongest soldiers, or something along that line. So if you're a leader and you've been given that responsibility, no, it ain't going to be easy, because if it was easy, anybody can do it. That is a special gift that you've been given. And you have to be a good steward of that gift. And you have to remember where that gift came from, that it goes beyond what your own personal power can do. And you have to then go back to God and say, is what I'm doing in alignment with what you want me to do? Give me strength to do this, because this is hard. And yes, you may stumble. Yes, you may fall. Yes, you may falter. And you may not win every single battle, but you'll win the war. Hope you enjoyed this today. We'll be back next week with chapter 9. And again, if you like today's message, here's a few other ways that I can help you grow faster. Number one, if you've got an event coming up, I'd love to be able to come and be your keynote speaker there. Number two, if you're interested in a sales mindset or leadership training workshop, please reach out to me and let me know that as well. Happy to have a conversation with you about that. And then number three, if you are a leader, you don't have to be an island, right? You can have somebody to work with on a regular basis. So if you'd like to work with me privately, I'd be happy to have a conversation with you about that. Until then, have a great day. Hope you enjoyed that. And again, we'll talk real soon.